Hello everyone, I'm Matt Mitrich, the Alternate Historian. Well, I'm still working on my next video, but in order to keep the almighty algorithm appeased, I'm still putting a video out this month. And since people seem to enjoy the book reviews I post across social media, I decided to make a short video where I talk about some of the books I've read lately that might appeal to my fellow alternate historians. First up, the 2020 novel Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre by Max Brooks, author of the Zombie Survival Guide and World War Z, and son of famous comedian Mel Brooks. As the title suggests, yes, this is about murderous Bigfoots, and despite that weird premise, the book is absolutely worth a read. It's set in the near future where America has invaded Venezuela and, oh yeah, Mount freaking Rainier has erupted and wiped out Seattle. This ultimately cuts off Greenloop, a remote eco-community a couple hours drive from Seattle, from the rest of the world. This community of city folk enjoy life in the wilderness with their high-tech homes. Even their food is normally delivered by drones. Thus, they're completely unprepared from the impact of the eruption, especially when it drives a troop of Sasquatch toward them. Sasquatch, who have also lost their primary food source, and have now been presented with some prey their ancestors used to hunt. Like World War Z, Devolution does not follow the typical story format. It's primarily told through the diary entries of a Greenloop resident, cut with interviews with other people. This is used especially well when the narrator admits to lying in an earlier entry because they not want to admit to themselves about their experiences in the woods during an impromptu hike. Brooks also did a lot of research, even mentioning an ancient species of giant ape that I referenced in my kaiju video. In fact, Brooks pulled from a lot of real-world ape behavior when creating his Sasquatches, including some of the more disturbing aspects of our primate cousins. All of this takes what should be a silly premise and turns it into an engaging techno-horror novel that I think you will enjoy. Next up is the 2016 novel Everfare by Nishi Saul. This debut novel is a Nebula nominee, and it follows British Fabian socialists and African-American Christian missionaries purchasing land in the Congo in the 1890s to found a nation called Everfare, which quickly comes into conflict with Leopold II of Belgium's brutal local colonial regime known as the Congo Free State. However, with the help of local natives and some steampunk tech developed in part by Chinese laborers who defected to their side, Everfare manages to win its independence and change the course of African history. We learn about Everfare's history, including its successes and mistakes, through the diverse cast of characters who age and grow throughout the story. Now, Everfare came highly recommended to me, and to be honest, it has a lot going for itself. It's a well-written story, and while I don't particularly like steampunk, I do like how it subverts many of the tropes from that genre. All the point of view characters are well-rounded with strengths and weaknesses that make them seem like real people. I also like some of the little details spread throughout the story which speak to larger changes to this timeline's history. Unfortunately, I didn't particularly enjoy Everfare. There was a lot of little things here and there that took me out of the story. For example, some characters basically just use magic, but that is introduced much later in the story, which was confusing since it doesn't seem that's where the story is going, even considering the steampunk tech that appears. Also, the relationships between some characters weren't well developed. I didn't know two characters were good friends until near the end of the novel, which as far as I can remember was the only time they were in direct conversation with each other. I don't know. Maybe all the hype made my expectations too high, and I certainly don't regret reading it. I mean, if you are sick and tired of same old of alternate history, and don't care too much about plausibility, Everfare is probably worth a read. And finally, we have the 2022 anthology Other Covenants, Alternate Histories of the Jewish People, edited by Andrea de Lobel and Mark Scheinblum. This anthology has an interesting real-world history, as it was crowdfunded but missed its 2020 publication date due to some issues with its original publisher that I won't get into for this review. Regardless, as the title suggests, this is a collection of short stories and poetry, all based on changes to Jewish history. Some of the titles, like To the Promised Land by Robert Silverberg or Shtetl Days by Harry Turtledove, are reprints, but most of the anthology is made up of original stories. Now, with any anthology, some stories will be better than others, but there weren't any stories I would call bad, although to be honest, I skipped over much of the poetry. Nothing against their authors, but poetry just isn't my thing. What is my thing is alternate histories of space exploration, like A Sky and a Heaven by Eric Choi, which features a different crew roster for the last flight of Space Shuttle Columbia, and how this ultimately causes the damage to the wing to be discovered before re-entry. This was both an intense and melancholic tale that left me in tears by the end. Other stories of note include The Premiere by Hunter Eden, where the history of the Jewish mob takes a much different path thanks to mobster Bugsy Siegel living longer. Then there is White Roses in Their Eyes by Matthew Kressel, where we read about two different versions of Anne Frank inhabiting alternate timelines. And you got And in This Corner by D.K. Latta, which tells a true story behind David and Goliath. And then there is Yassel the Gunslinger by Max Sparber, where a Jewish gunman takes on some Cossacks in a very different Wild West. So yeah, check out Other Covenants, especially if you have an interest in Jewish history. And that is what I've been reading. If you like this kind of video, let me know, and I'll try to do more of it in the future. Anywho, I'm Matt Mitrovic, the Alternate Historian. Bye.